Dakota Territory had a harsh winter in 1884. Snow buried dreams and hope like judgment. A young woman trekked through knee-deep drifts in this cold tundra, her ragged coat barely protecting her life. That week, Emmeline Grace knocked on 17 doors but couldn't get through. Her spouse was cold in the ground, her family scattered, and her tummy got bigger every day. Stonewall Ranch, where Magnus Creed governed thousands of acres like a monarch without a realm, had the 18th door. Neither could have guessed how her collapse at his gate would impact everything. When a lady with nothing to lose meets a hopeless guy, what happens? Before we resume, tell us where you're listening, and if this tale impacts you, subscribe because I have something special for you tomorrow. Magnus Creed watched the blizzard across his wide realm from his study window. He was revered by cattlemen and feared by others in Dakota Territory aged 42. 20,000 acres of ideal grazing property made him one of the wealthiest men west of the Mississippi, and the Stonewall Ranch stretched as far as the eye could see. Despite living in luxury most could only dream of, he felt empty tonight like the roaring wind. Death had rendered promises useless, yet his gold wedding band caught the lamplight. Magnus wore the ring 3 years after Sarah's fever killed her and their unborn baby. He discovered that some habits were harder to break than wild horses. A sharp door rap interrupted his musing. Magnus turned from the window when his foreman, Mr. Creed, spoke urgently. "Welcome, Holt." Snow from his coat melted over the Persian carpets as the weary cowboy entered. "Sir, a problem at the entrance gate. A woman has collapsed in the snow, possibly with child." Magnus's jaw stiffened. "Drunk? Sir, don't seem so. Walking in these weather makes her look famished, or God knows how long." Holt shifted awkwardly. "Martha prepared the guest room, assuming you'd want her inside." Magnus should have been annoyed by his housekeeper's assumption, but Martha had been with the family before his marriage. She deserved certain liberties, especially in Christian compassion. Still, he hesitated. Every lost traveler didn't stop at Stonewall Ranch. "Says what she wants," says Little. "Anything, sir?" "We discovered her barely conscious, but—" Holt paused, cautiously speaking. "Mr. Creed, she looks that way. She says she's been through hell yet kept walking." Magnus recognized that look. He'd seen it in his mirror often. "Bring her in. After the storm, she's gone." "Yes. Yes, sir?" Holt headed out but halted. Something else. She clutched it. A tiny oilcloth package was in his hand, like a baby blanket, hand-knit. Other than her clothes, she had nothing. When Magnus saw the small blanket, his chest twisted. He thought too much of the upstairs nursery, still bright and white and waiting for a child that would never come home. "Deliver to Martha. She'll know." Magnus poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and reclined into his leather chair once Holt left. Having a stranger in the house changed it. He'd gotten used to the quiet and routine of his alone. Get up early, check herds, assess the books, read cattle market reports while eating dinner alone. It was a life without surprise, hope, or the messy problems of caring for another. Hearing footsteps in the hallway above, he looked up. Unexpected guest Martha was settling in, likely clucking like a mother hen. For months, his maid had urged him to get involved in the community, remarry, and quit treating Stonewall Ranch like a mausoleum. Perhaps she was forcing his hand. Magnus climbed the stairs after finishing his whiskey, pausing outside the guest room door. Through the breach, he saw Martha wrapping blankets around a small figure with care. The woman on the bed was younger than he expected, maybe around 25, with dark hair on the pillow like ink. Even asleep and worn by stress, her face showed quiet strength. "How's she?" he asked quietly. Martha raised her gray, compassionate eyes. "Probably half frozen and hasn't eaten in weeks. But she's strong. Considering the baby is doing well. Smoothed. Mommy care blanket." She stirred and murmured about being grateful for kindness while I cleaned her up. Was her name said? Emmeline, perhaps. Emmeline Grace. Martha inspected his face. "Mr. Creed, look after her. One hot supper and a cozy bed won't fix this." Magnus nods. Though he fought, he'd realized that it was too expensive to care for others, not when loss was so quick and painful. He should keep his distance and aid without getting involved. When he gazed at the woman sleeping in his guest room, something he believed was buried awakened. Sarah was recognized, not attracted, since she knew how to survive when the world had taken everything away. Who knew survival sometimes involved traveling through storms that would break lesser souls. Make sure she has it. He concluded, she needs Martha goes when healthy enough to travel. As he returned to his study, the housekeeper's knowing smile followed him down the hallway. He regretted inviting chaos into his tidy environment. Morning light streamed through frost-etched windows as Emmeline Grace awakened under comfortable wool blankets for the first time in months. The warmth and coziness felt like a dream until her belly moved, reminding her of reality. She and her child survived. Her chamber had polished oak furniture, lush carpets, and pastoral paintings on the walls. A fire in the stone hearth cast golden light and heavenly warmth. She saw bread, jam, and real butter on her nightstand, pleasures she hadn't had since Thomas's death. A faint knock halted her astonishment. "Come in," she shouted, hoarse from the cold. The elderly woman appeared with neatly arranged silver hair and a utilitarian yet well-made outfit. Kind eyes examined Emmeline like a caregiver. "Good morning, love. I'm Stonewall Ranch housekeeper Martha Sullivan. You feelin'?" Emmeline strained to sit up, conscious of her faded nightgown and matted hair. "Better, thank you. I don't recall anything from last night. Do Mr. Creed? Did he bring me in?" Martha reported the pillow behind Emmeline's back was adjusted with maternal care at his command. "Though Holt and the boys carried you, collapsing at the gate scared us. How long were you walking in the storm?" "Not sure. It might be days." Emmeline impulsively touched her round belly. "Just one more door, one more willing helper," I thought. "Never expected." She gestured around the luck space. Martha's face relaxed. "Now you're safe. It matters. Let's feed you properly. Eating for two." Martha was setting the breakfast tray, and Emmeline noted she was respectful of the room's decor. She purposefully avoided staring at a dusty-sheeted rocking chair in a corner. Emmeline began gently. "Mrs. Sullivan, please tell Mr. Creed I appreciate his compassion. I'm an unanticipated burden and don't want to linger." "No, you're not a burden." Martha interrupted her massage to examine Emmeline's face. "Though Magnus, Mr. Creed, may disagree. His company is scarce these days. Has he always been alone?" Martha held the tray still. "Not always. This house was full of laughing. His wife Sarah's melodic laugh could be heard 3 rooms away. That was before—" She paused, appearing to catch herself. "First, 3 years before the illness killed her and their pregnant child. It changed him, hardened him in ways a hardy man wouldn't." Martha spoke with shared pain. Others cope with loss by connecting. Instead, Magnus erected barriers. Recognition struck Emmeline. After Thomas's death, she wanted to hide from everyone, find a peaceful place where pain couldn't reach her. Only the life growing inside her kept her going. Her door-knocking continued even when hope seemed futile. "The baby," she whispered. "He must struggle with a pregnant woman at home. Yes, difficult, but possibly necessary." Martha's knowing glance indicated she saw more. "God sometimes places people in our path when we need them most, even if we don't recognize it." Emmeline saw the snowy countryside through the window after the storm. Buildings on the ranch stretched forever toward rolling hills. Clean walkways cleared by hard workers. Her chest tightened with hunger because it was gorgeous, not just for refuge but for belonging beyond her desperate existence. "Mrs. Sullivan, how long will Mr. Creed let me stay?" "I expect till you're well enough to travel." Martha drew closer conspiratorially. "Although Magnus Creed may have a gentler heart than he lets on, too long alone he rattles around this large mansion like a ghost haunting his existence, as if called." Heavy footsteps resonated in the hallway as they talked. Martha smoothed her apron. "He'll check on you. He's been pacing the floors since dawn, pretending not to care about you." Emmeline held her breath as the footsteps stopped outside the door, preparing to face the man who saved her life. She caressed the baby blanket arranged neatly at the foot of the bed, her last connection to the life she'd lost, and wondered what this meeting would bring to her uncertain future. The knock was deliberate but mild. Emmeline adjusted her borrowed dress, Martha's hastily altered one, and invited him in. The doorway appeared to take all the air from the room as Magnus Creed entered. She was surprised by his height and strong shoulders, which suggested muscular exertion despite his affluence. His dark hair had premature silver streaks, and his eyes were guarded like a man who'd learned to measure every word and action. Mrs. Grace, his sound reflected the frontier's raw edges and education. "I hope Martha met your needs. It's impossible to thank Mr. Creed enough for your kindness." Emmeline cautiously rose from the chair, aware of how he must see her situation. Something flickered across his features. "I realize my being here is an imposition." She may surprise with her directness. "You can stay till the weather clears and you're strong enough to leave." Martha says you're not eating well. Recently, food is scarce. Even though empty cupboards and shut doors haunted her, she kept her voice steady. I've been traveling since my spouse died, looking for jobs and a new start. Magnus glanced at her thin gold band on her hands. Sorry for your loss. Trade of your husband? Though a farmer, Thomas was business savvy. Wheat and livestock were raised on a tiny farm outside Deadwood. After the blight killed the crops, the fever killed him. She hesitated, steadying. A lady in my state alone, I couldn't run the farm. He sold land to pay debts. After creditors charged, little remained. Protectively, Emmeline touched her belly. Taking only what I could carry, I walked. Magnus renewed his interest on her. Not the desperate vagrant he expected, but a woman who'd known affluence and lost it to circumstances beyond her control. Despite her circumstances, she spoke with respect and education. Where were you going? Billings. I heard hotels nearby might have cleaning or cooking jobs, but the storm took my path. She caught his gaze. I don't want charity, Mr. Creed. I can make a living here if there's job. The chance would be appreciated for a few days. He was surprised by the request. Magnus expected weeping, pleas for longer shelter, emotional manipulation he'd grown cynical of since Sarah's death. This woman offered to work for her bread. Carrying a child. Heavy labor is forbidden. Impregnant, not invalid. I've managed myself for months. She spoke with hardness under her beautiful voice. I cook, clean, fix clothes, and treat minor injuries. On our farm, I assisted Thomas with books and mail. Honest work doesn't scare me. Magnus was shocked by his real interest in the proposition. Housework on the property constantly required more help. Martha was getting older, and the home was too big for one woman, but employing a pregnant woman seemed risky. When will the child arrive? Still months distant. I don't want more promises. That, Emily raised her chin. I prefer earning my position here to accepting charity, however nice. A chaos broke out in the courtyard below before Magnus could respond. Raised shouts and racing feet attracted them. At the window, a ranch hand staggering toward the house was helped by two others. Blood oozed from his leg bandage. One man called up after north fence accident. Wire snapped, hitting Jake's shin. Looks terrible. Magnus turned for the door but halted as Emily passed. You going where? She was gathering her skirts to help. I promised to treat injuries. Mrs. Grace, you're confused. Jake's gravely hurt and no doctor is within 50 miles. Emily stopped at the door and looked more authoritative than he anticipated from someone in her position. My grandma was a healer and midwife, Mr. Creed. She taught me how set bones, sew wounds, and blend herbs into remedies. I've delivered babies, treated fever, and stopped men from bleeding. I can assist your ranch hand. She descended without authorization, leaving Magnus behind. As he observed her calmly handle the problem, his perspective changed. Her presence wasn't just another burden on his hospitality. She was powerful and had abilities his secluded ranch needed. Magnus Creed was intrigued by another person for the first time in 3 years. Like ice cracking after a long, brutal winter, it was disturbing and unexpected. Jake was snug in the bunkhouse by evening, his leg washed, stitched, and bandaged with precision that impressed even the most experienced ranch workers. Emmeline's medical skills circulated fast around Stonewall Ranch, and Magnus received inquiries from men with minor diseases for weeks. After dinner, he tried to focus on ledger entries in his study, but the upstairs sounds kept distracting him. Even though Martha complained, Emmeline helped with evening duties. Martha's warm laughter and Emmeline's gentler comments filled the corridor, livening the house. He'd forgotten its capacity. Magnus opened his leather journal, having done so for 15 years since his father's death. The pages tracked his empire's expansion. Cattle prices, weather, and business decisions made him richer than most men. For the first time in years, he wrote about something other than ranch business tonight, and Emmeline exceeded expectations. Her medical expertise rivals any frontier doctor I've met. Without treatment, Jake's injuries could have cost him his leg. She worked steadily and authoritatively. Blood or man's cry. Her presence alters the vibe here. The males speak quietly and stand straighter, as if to meet her unstated standard. He paused, pen hanging over the page, questioning why he needed to record these insights in his journal since Sarah's death. Clinical entries lack personal reflection. Here he was, photographing Emmeline's black hair in the afternoon light as she worked in her soft power while instructing the men on Jake's care. She is dignified despite her difficulties. There's breeding and education. Though she wears her hardships like badges of honor, Martha is partially in love with her, caring over her condition and evidently enjoying having another woman in the house. Even Holt, who distrusts strangers, respects her. A slight knock halted his writing. Magnus hurriedly closed the diary and invited the visitor in. Emmeline appeared uncertain in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Creed. Martha suggested I find you here. Is something wrong? Is Jake?" "No, he's sleeping soundly. I'd like to discuss my agreement." After entering the room, she noticed the manly decor, mounted weapons, cattle route maps, and prize bull photos. "I meant earning my keep." Magnus indicated the chair across from his desk. "Please sit. Today, you more than proved yourself. I've been thinking about what I could accomplish without disrupting your business." Emmeline took her seat carefully. "Martha said you handle much of ranch mail and accountancy. I could help if you trusted me." Offer startled him. Few frontier women could read or write business letters. "You know accounts. Thomas and I ran our farm. My duties included bookkeeping, seed and equipment orders, and Deadwood and Rapid City buyer correspondence. I'm good with numbers and letters." Magnus contemplated her. Since his holdings expanded, the ranch's paperwork had grown daunting. He considered hiring a town clerk. However, teaching someone in his methods seemed more hassle than gain. Work can be hard. Cattle sales, land deals, Chicago-Denver buyer correspondence. "Yes, I understand. I understand you shouldn't trust a stranger with such vital stuff. Would you let me start with smaller tasks? Prove my dependability." Her tone reminded him of himself when he was young and eager to show himself to suspicious cattlemen. That desire to prove oneself and be respected above circumstances. "Very nicely. We'll start with mail, filing, and bookkeeping. If you perform well, we'll discuss expanding your duties." Relief crossed her face. "Thank you. This choice won't disappoint." "I hope not." Magnus reset his journal and looked up to see her still sitting. "Was there more? Please know that I appreciate your kindness. Taking in a stranger and trusting me with work means more. Then you might realize." Before he could react, she rose and headed out. She hesitated at the threshold. "Your wife must have loved this house and ranch. It feels like a lovingly made place." Observation hit him unexpectedly hard. Sarah stated something similar when he brought her to Stonewall Ranch as his bride. Magnus lingered at the closed door after she went, thinking how his wife had warmed frigid places like Emmeline was doing now. He added one last line to the day's entry using his pen. Perhaps walls designed to block suffering also block possibility. 3 days later, Emmeline had a routine that amazed everyone, including herself. Her efficiency in sorting correspondence and updating ledges in Magnus's study in the mornings amazed him. Martha taught us the great house rhythms while sharing stories and laughing in the afternoons. She began to attract attention from the community in the nights. Her healing abilities went beyond Stonewall Ranch. Around nightfall, farmers and their families arrived to find relief from winter ailments. Magnus watched from his study window. As she checked a rancher's wife with a weeks-long cough, she gently examined for fever and listened to the woman's respiration. Holt said, "She's got the touch." Joining Magnus at the window, "Sarah told me some people are born with healing fingers." "Yes, the tiny lady has it." Magnus had never heard his boss mention his late wife. After Sarah Holt died in childbirth 5 years earlier, the weathered cowboy raised their son alone. Does she know what she's doing? She's smarter than most. See how she maneuvers around them. Always listening, never rushing. That's wisdom, not book learning. Emmeline left the house with a little canvas bag to establish his argument. She approached the waiting family with confidence, used to being needed. Magnus was attracted downstairs to check on ranch business, but mainly to watch her work. "Mrs. Patterson," Emmeline told a mother holding a restless baby, "the child's digestion is off. Your milk change suggests you've been eating differently since the supply carts couldn't get through." A tired woman said she had only salt, ham, and beans for 2 weeks. "We had nothing else." Emmeline nodded knowingly. "The infant is reacting to your bland diet. I'll make fennel tea for you. It'll calm both stomachs." She pulled out a little package of dried herbs from her backpack. "Chamomile and mint, soak it weekly and give the baby a few drops, but we need to feed you fresh foods." Magnus had gotten close enough to hear the talk, so she turned. "Mr. Creed, do you store fresh vegetables, carrots, potatoes, anything substantial?" The request made him uncomfortable. Offering food to every suffering household in the territory would swiftly drain his huge supplies. However, Emmeline's expectant stare made refusal difficult. Martha has a good root cellar. I believe we might spare some supplies, Mrs. Patterson inhaled. We'll resolve it in spring. Make sure, Magnus replied hesitantly. He discovered that Emmeline made him generous in ways that defied logic. He observed her treat a child's infected cut, advise an oldster about his arthritis, and create a poultice for a woman with weather-cracked hands throughout the evening. Her expertise deepened with each interaction, revealing years of skillful instruction. Magnus spotted Emmeline sitting on the porch steps with her hands on her belly after the final family left with thanks and vows to repay the borrowed supplies. Tired? He inquired, sitting near her cautiously. Content? She corrected. Being useful again feels fantastic. I felt so after Thomas died. Purposeless, like I was alive but not living. Where did you learn everything? Healing, that is. Emmeline looked away. Nana Rose, my grandmother, was our county's nearest doctor. Set more broken bones than she could count, delivered half the infants in 3 townships. After my mother died at 7, Nana Rose raised me, said wasting my gift would be a sin. This woman sounds extraordinary. She was. Had her last baby aged 89 and lived to be 92. She said the good Lord will take her after her task. Emmeline grinned at the memory, or she might have liked you. You say that why? You construct durable stuff. Her motto was that the best people left the world better. How you care for your people on the ranch is healing. Her words moved Magnus. He'd never considered his profession that way, but she may be right. Perhaps producing something lasting and providing jobs was medicine for a world that appeared intent on destruction. He whispered Emmeline, surprising himself with her first name. You're welcome here if you need refuge, not for charity, but because you've shown value here. Her smile warmed his chest like sunlight breaking through clouds after too long of cold. The weeks that followed felt normal and hazardous to Magnus. They spent evenings in his study, Emmeline's immaculate handwriting logging livestock transactions while he studied contracts and correspondence. Their uneasy quiet had become comfortable, interspersed by conversations about ranch business that showed her commercial acumen. After studying the newest telegram, Emmeline noticed Denver purchasers are asking $12 per head. Henderson's letter claims they pay Wyoming ranchers $15. Magnus looked up from his papers. Henderson over-protrudes to appear successful. We cross more territory than Wyoming cattle. Different prices, yet $12 seems inexpensive for excellent beef. How about delaying the herd until spring? Let grass-fed cattle command premiums. It made sense. Magnus considered the same method but abandoned it for winter, feeding costs. He reconsidered after Emmeline said it. Our feed expenses would be high if we couldn't get hay delivery due to snow. Your southern pastures are clear most winters, right? I saw cattle there, still grazing despite snow elsewhere. She traced the map between them with her finger. The springs in the protected valley prevent the earth from freezing. He was shocked by her observation. His land's details were rarely seen or comprehended by tourists. Your eye is helpful for terrain. I learned to read land like women read recipes from Thomas. He claimed knowing your ground made or broke you. She looked wistful. The place would have pleased him, its scope and possibilities. Magnus was uneasy with his curiosity regarding her late husband. You were married how long? 3 years. I married at 18 after meeting at 17. Older, more farming and business savvy. My grandma felt I was too young, but Thomas was kind and patient. He taught me everything about farming. A good wife should. Partner, not housekeeping. Love filled her voice when she spoke about Thomas. Not the raw grief Magnus expected. Time helped her accept her loss. Sounds like a nice guy. He was, but he left. Now I must consider the future. She routinely touched her belly. Stability, education, and opportunities are needed for this child. I can't give those things as a charity-dependent traveling widow. He was surprised by the practicality. Magnus thought her job at Stonewall Ranch was a brief method to restore strength before moving on. But her statements suggested long-term planning. You think what? I think you've developed a fantastic community and fortune. Ranch workers stay for years. Their relatives live nearby. Kids grow up hopeful. Thomas and I envisioned it on our small property. She caught his gaze. Please let me join this. The talk was going places Magnus didn't expect. Offering temporary shelter was one thing. Discussing permanent arrangements required commitments he wasn't ready for. Something about her directness attracted to him. No tears, no emotional manipulation, just honest mutual benefit evaluation. What are you proposing? Let me prove my worth. I want actual obligations, not charity. I'll handle your mail, keep home finances, and treat ranch personnel and families. I want a home for my family, reasonable earnings, and knowing we belong. A seasoned negotiator made the business pitch. Magnus knew she was providing him something he didn't want initially. Help with ranch operations and domestic purpose. Stonewall Ranch would be a living business rather than a memorial. If you married again and a different man promises you security, Emmeline's smile was surprising warm. I assume you'd need someone else to handle your mail. Magnus, his first name, made him quiver. I'm no longer 17 years old. I'm a self-aware woman seeking romance and salvation. Any man who wants me must accept my duties and viewpoints. Magnus took his father's gold pocket watch from his desk drawer, symbolizing the Creed inheritance and the weight of establishing something permanent. He carried it daily since inheriting the property as a symbol of duty and continuity. Tomorrow we'll prepare employment documents. A genuine job with pay and security awaits you. Pausing, he examined her face. Stonewall welcomes you, officially Ranch Miss Emmeline. Her smile warmed the study, as if winter was easing in the large home. A rider who wanted to leave Stonewall Ranch hurriedly delivered the letter on Tuesday morning. Magnus broke the wax seal while Emmeline organized the day's mail, unaware that the contents would upend their cozy routine. Millicent Ashford, the ranch's neighboring town's self-appointed social judge, was on the letterhead. Her spidery handwriting showed care and cruel intent. Dear Mr. Creed, as a longtime friend of your late Sarah and a woman who reveres the Creed family name, I must raise some concerns. I believe a man of your upstanding character may not have considered the consequences of a pregnant woman of unknown origins living unmarried in. Your home provides awful gossip possibilities for our less charitable community members. I'm sure your motives are Christian, but people may make judgments that hurt your reputation and business ties. I trust you to consider this. Mrs. Millicent Ashford, your worried friend P.S. Young Mrs. Henderson saw this woman treating the Patterson youngster. I hope you don't let unlicensed doctors on your premises. The territorial authorities frown on such actions. The letter was read twice by Magnus. His jaw tightens with each word. He knew Emmeline would grab attention, but he miscalculated how quickly gossip spread in secluded communities. Years ago, Millicent Ashford became guardian of propriety, using her late husband's territorial judgeship to punish those who didn't meet her high standards. Bad news? Emmeline noted his expression and questioned. Magnus hesitated, then gave her the note. He saw her hands tighten on the paper as she read, but her face remained calm. After finishing, she carefully folded it. I saw you set it aside. How does Mrs. Ashford rank in society? Too much, unfortunately. Her husband served as territorial judge for 15 years. She has cattle buyer and railroad official contacts in Denver. A word from her may complicate business. She nodded seriously and offered advice. She wants you gone quietly, and soon before more tongues wag. Magnus was furious at having to say so. She warned territorial authorities about your internal medical practice. I have no official education, only grandmotherly knowledge. Magnus heard hurt in Emmeline's steady, realistic voice. I might be better off moving on. Spring trip is easy because I saved enough from my wages to pay bills. The suggestion hit Magnus harder than expected. Emmeline had become essential to his work and daily routine in recent weeks. The notion of lonely evenings and empty discussions became painful. It's one alternative, he said cautiously. Other examples include... Magnus stood and headed to the window to think. Outside ranch, Andy's worked beneath a lovely winter sky. Everything looked regular. However, he felt his world was about to alter. Instead of speculating, we should offer gossip something specific to talk. Long quiet from Emmeline made him turn. Her face was unreadable, but her hands were protecting her belly. Silently, she said, marriage. You advise marriage. I propose a reasonable solution to various issues. Your safety and respect would be guaranteed. I'd have a qualified ranch manager and someone to... He stopped, fumbling with inadequate words. Someone to make this place a home again, not a monument. The child would be lawful. With all its rights and privileges. The Creed name matters here. No one would suspect a child with it. She rose and joined him by the window, near enough for him to smell Martha's lavender soap. What about love, Magnus? How was your marriage to Sarah? This question hit him harder than intended. He married Sarah out of real fondness that had blossomed into deep love. What he proposed to Emmeline was different, useful but emotionally safe. Not sure I can afford love, he admitted. Losing Sarah nearly ruined me. I offer partnership, respect, and security. Perhaps that's enough. If not, one of us can't return if we develop feelings. Magnus couldn't respond. He based his argument on the idea that they had learnt to shield their hearts and that practicality might replace emotional risk. Looking at Emmeline now, with afternoon light in her hair and gentle power in her demeanor, he realized his own feelings might be less controlled than suspected. I think we'd have to trust one other to be honest about such issues, he concluded. Sad and knowing, Emmeline smiled. Magnus Creed, you solicit my marriage. Not a business proposal. No matter the context, it's two people deciding to live together. Before he could react, she left the study, leaving him with the letter and the realization that his perfectly controlled world was about to shift profoundly. That evening, Magnus stood before the photograph in his bedroom that had been unviewed since he decided to forget it. He finally forced himself to gaze at the face that had once been his universe, and Sarah's painted eyes followed him. The artist captured her well, warm brown eyes that might melt or dazzle. With compassion, her auburn hair that caught sunlight like spun copper and her lovely smile softened even the toughest ranch hand's language in her presence. 23 was her death age. Forever young womanhood, unaffected by time. His slumber was interrupted by a faint knock come in, he said, anticipating Emmeline. She timidly came with a chamomile mint tea tray. Martha thought you might prefer evening tea. She worries about your dinner absence. Magnus happily took the cup, observing Emmeline's respectful curiosity in the portrait. Emmeline whispered, she was lovely, beautiful, gentle, and full of dreams for our life together. Magnus slumped on his bedside chair, feeling every year of his 42nd. She wanted kids right away, saying the house felt empty without young voices. I kept assuring her we had time to create the ranch and fortune before having children. He confirmed that time ran out. Fever struck in her 7th month. The doctor stated the baby might have survived if we'd transported her to Denver, but he couldn't finish because we knew how severe it was. Emmeline sat across from him. She held her cup. So blame yourself. I should have spotted the signals earlier, demanded better medical care, and put her needs before my pride in doing everything myself. He said the words more easily than expected, as if uttering them out removed some of their venom in his heart. I let her down when she needed me. Emmeline's voice was kind, Magnus. The fever takes over. Despite our greatest efforts, I've seen strong men die and seemingly hopeless cases recover. Medicine can't always overrule nature. Sounds like the preacher who buried them. I sound like someone who's realized grieving people can't afford guilt. You can remember Sarah without taking responsibility for her death. Magnus reviewed the portrait with new eyes. Sarah's painted smile encouraged him, not accused him. Her approach to misfortune was always practical, moving on rather than focusing on what couldn't be altered. He abruptly claimed she liked you. Sarah was impatient with defenseless women. She would have admired your resolve and wanted you to be happy again. He was surprised by the straightforward comment. He'd spent 3 years thinking happiness would betray Sarah's memory, and that moving forward meant discarding what they'd shared. Now, looking at the portrait, he realized Sarah would never have wanted him frozen. In grief, Emmeline thought about your marriage proposal, which was practical. Magnus braced for rejection. I disagree that love is an unaffordable luxury. I guess you're frightened caring about someone fresh would reduce your feelings for Sarah. She put her tea down and stood by the portrait. Magnus, love is infinite. Feeling for me wouldn't erase her memory. Do you care for me? Emmeline's cheeks blushed, but her eyes stayed steady. Respect you. I admire your work and people handling. Feeling protected with you is unlike after Thomas died. She shrugged when asked if that could become love. It must be given the chance to find out. Magnus stood with her before the portrait. Sarah's face was calm, almost approving, as if blessing whatever followed next. If we do this, he said slowly, I want you to understand if we married, I won't ask you to replace Sarah or ignore her. Memory, room, and portrait are part of me. Please don't forget her. She changed you into the man I trust with my future. Emmeline carefully adjusted the portrait's frame. She and I may have been pals. A woman with this much affection must have good taste. After 3 years, Magnus smiled in Sarah's presence instead of grieving. The first wildflower appeared on a late March Tuesday morning, a bold prairie rose crossing the final snow patches near the ranch house porch. Emmeline spotted it during her morning stroll, which she continued despite her pregnancy. Her condition at 7 months was obvious, but she moved with the same grace as when she arrived to Stonewall Ranch. Magnus saw her kneeling beside the flower, one hand supporting her back and the other reverently tracing the exquisite petals. The image sparked something in his chest that had become harder to ignore, affection for the woman who'd given his lonely life a new life. "First, spring sign," she murmured without looking up. "Nana Rose always said wildflowers show us that beauty follows hardship." "The grandmother sounds wise," Emmeline said with a smile that lit up her face. She believed that every flower that grew despite hardships proved hope was stronger than despair. Magnus helped her up, naturally lingering on her arms. His hand on her elbow as they climbed stairs, her fingers touching his, had become routine over the weeks. As they exchanged documents, innocent but hopeful touch, he expressed hope, saying, "I heard from the minister yesterday. If you agree, he'll ride through next week and execute the ceremony." They decided to marry 3 weeks prior, but the choice felt abstract. Until now, reality appeared immediate and tangible. While contemplating his comments, Emmeline looked thoughtful. "Are you doubting?" she asked. "Are you first?" I asked. Magnus smiled at her candor. She had this trait he admired most, the way she faced uncomfortable conversations without avoiding them. "I want to make sure you realize what you're accepting. I think marriage means joining something bigger than us. You're responsible for this ranch, its people, and your child's legacy." "Our child," she softly amended. "You've made it plain you want the baby." His heart warmed at her casual possessiveness. After months, he stopped thinking of the child as Emmeline's burden but shared future. He'd started planning a nursery next to their bedroom. Upon reaching riding age, a pony, preparation for ranch inheritance through education. "Our child," he agreed. "Have you considered names?" "Some. Rose for my grandmother's daughter." "Or a boy?" She stopped, perhaps considering her comments. "I considered James after my dad, but I wanted to know your preferences." Magnus appreciated her, considering his input on something so personal. "James is a strong name, and Rose matches a child who'll grow up among wildflowers and open spaces." Emmeline rested her hand on his arm as they gently returned to the house. The motion had become natural over weeks. Evening strolls felt different today. More personal, promising permanent relationship. "Magnus," she continued as they approached the porch steps, "I need to tell you what I anticipate from this marriage." His heart raced, terrified she'd reconsider. "Go on. I understand why you portrayed this as a practical setup, but please know that I won't settle for a name-only marriage." Her cheeks color, but her voice is steady. "I hope we can create something real. Partnership, affection, possibly love. No push. You provide more than you're willing to give, but I won't settle for company." The truth in her declaration thrilled and frightened him. Magnus thought a comfortable, polite companionship would be enough, but Emmeline suggested more. She suggested they develop a true, caring, and growing connection, not just a marriage. "You want intimacy, and we'll work it out if I can't deliver." "But Magnus," she faced him with serious dark eyes. "I felt your gaze while you believe I'm not watching. My darling, your voice alters when you talk of our future. Though you may think you've locked your heart away, I believe it's waiting. Let me feel again." She stood up and kissed his cheek before he could answer. He felt his flesh heating and his pulse beating after the brief, almost sisterly contact. With a smile that offered everything and asked nothing, she said 1 week, stepping back. "We'll be ready." Magnus felt his face where her lips had been as she disappeared into the house and knew that, ready or not, his heart was already opening to possibilities he thought lost forever. Magnus's grandmother's beautiful white gold engagement ring included a small but flawless diamond that sparkled like starfire. He chose it from the safe after 2 decades, since it had no Sarah memories. It would be fresh and unaffected by grief or expectations. No matter Martha's complaints, Magnus discovered Emmeline in the garden behind the house, pulling early vegetables from the rich soil. She kneeled among the orderly rows of budding lettuce and radishes, her hands dark with earth and countenance calm. His chest tightened with unexpected emotion. Emmeline, covering her eyes from the midday heat, looked up at his words. "Your tone is serious. Has something happened linguistically?" Magnus helped her stand, noting that she relied on him more than a week earlier. The baby's growth made ordinary things harder, yet she rarely complained. "Got something for you." He took the ring from his jacket pocket and saw her face alter as she recognized it. The small gold bracelet caught the sun, revealing its value. "Beautiful, Magnus. My grandmother's. She wore it for 63 years, raised 7 children, and lived with my grandfather until his death." He paused, gathering strength for words more important than any business transaction he'd struck. "I hope it symbolizes something lasting for us." Emmeline offered her left hand and Magnus placed the ring on it. It fit flawlessly, like she had been waiting decades for it. He felt a surprising possessive thrill seeing it there, marking her as his bride. "It's official," she whispered, relishing the diamond's shimmer on her work-ruffled fingers. "Stop speculating about my status." "No more guesswork," he said. "Become Mrs. Magnus Creed with all the rights and protections that name brings." The tone of his voice made her look up. "Protections and rights. It sounds like a business contract." Magnus quickly recognized his error. After weeks of sharing evening discussions and comfortable silences, he returned to the formal distancing that felt safer. He realized that safety was no longer his goal after seeing Emmeline's hurtful expression. That was wrong. He held her hands in his ring and felt how little they were. "I believed I was helping a needy woman when you arrived here, Emmeline. Then I felt I had a good hire. I thought I was offering a realistic arrangement when the rumor started. And now I know I lied to myself." Magnus had to admit it, even though it felt like leaving a cliff. This became less about charity and practicalities. "Emmeline, I care about you, not only your health or usefulness, but how you hum as you work, listen when people chat, and bring laughter back to this house." Her grin was brilliant despite tears. "I wondered when you'd admit it. You knew, I hoped. But wishing is different from knowing." She approached, breaking their careful distance. "I must also inform you. Even though I needed protection, I didn't accept your offer. Since I'm falling for you, I accept it." He felt the words like swimming into sun-warmed water, not a painful blow. Magnus believed Sarah had killed his love for months. But seeing Emily now, he felt his heart grow in ways he hadn't expected. He said, "I love you too, more easily than expected. I probably have for weeks, but I was obstinate to confess it." This kiss was more than the week before's sisterly touch. This kiss was deep, sweet, and promising. Magnus was aware of her illness but wanted to keep her close when they broke up. Both had irregular breathing. Emmeline whispered against his mouth that 1 week feels lengthy. Magnus said, "We'll shorten the week," and sealed the agreement with another eternal kiss. As they held hands in the late afternoon light, the engagement ring symbolized free will and choice. They saw a new life in the garden, and the future spread out like an unwritten narrative waiting for their love. The train ticket included the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad stamp from 3 days earlier, indicating a purposeful journey. Magnus examined the crumpled paper Holt had found beside the gate, his stomach twisting with apprehension. Any Stonewall Ranch visitor was noteworthy, but this seemed different. Holt said a stranger arrived an hour ago, his aged face furrowed with worry. The well-dressed man on a nice horse, who was pushing it hard, looked like he'd been traveling fast for days. He inquired about Mrs. Grace. Ice formed in Magnus's veins. Questions of what kind? Was she here? How long did she stay? Her situation? Holt's careful wording couldn't hide his intention. "I told him I wasn't supposed to talk about ranchers' personal lives. He didn't like the response." "Where is he?" "Rode to town, but he'll return." "Did he look like a man with unfinished business?" Holt shifted awkwardly. "Another thing, Mr. Creed. He was aware of her. Named her late spouse. Said he had Thomas Grace estate legal issues." Magnus heard blood roaring. Emmeline said Thomas Grace's estate was resolved months earlier. Her husband's debts were paid and all assets liquidated. What legal issues could exist, and why would someone go from Denver to discuss them days before her wedding? Martha's soft cotton clothing were meticulously folded by Emmeline in the nursery she'd prepared. She looked up at his entry, beaming with happiness from recent weeks. The look of her joy made telling her harder. "We must talk." Something in his tone lowered her smile. "What's wrong?" Magnus shut the door and went to the window to calm down. "A man came today to ask about you and Thomas's estate. He saw her reflection in the glass and her relaxed hands on the baby garments." "Questions of what kind?" "They indicate your late husband's affairs were more complicated than you thought." Magnus faced her. Can you tell me anything about Thomas's business transactions, Emmeline? What debts or liabilities survived his death? However, her voice lacked conviction. I thought Thomas handled most of the business. He assured me that the grain merchant loans and agricultural loans were manageable. How about business partners? Who might have had estate claims? Emmeline retreated to the rocking chair, her hands protecting her belly. I saw James Whitmore. I never participated in his wheat futures negotiations with Thomas. James attended Thomas's burial and promised to settle things, but I was too overwhelmed. Kind of aid? He claimed Thomas owed him from a failed business endeavor. In exchange, he provided debt forgiveness. As for other reasons, her cheeks were stained with humiliation. He said that as Thomas's widow, I owed his business partners. Magnus grew enraged. Exactly what obligations? Marriage. He said Thomas's commitment to guarantee a loan with my hand was legally binding. Emmeline's anger boosted her voice. I told him that was impossible and that Thomas would never agree without my knowledge. James claimed everything was documented, but when I demanded the paperwork, he got hostile. How unpleasant. He claimed that challenging him would impoverish me since I was ignorant and didn't understand business. He gave me time to think, but I sold everything and left. She glanced up at Magnus with fearful and defiant eyes. I believed separation would end it. Never expected him to follow me. Magnus kneeled beside her chair, holding her chilly hands in his warm ones. Whatever documents he claims, his claims about Thomas's agreements aren't binding. You can't be forced to marry, right? Magnus, these rights are limited for women. She shuddered. If he could establish Thomas pledged my marriage for debt. Say the courts agree with him. Magnus shuddered at the possibility. He assumed Emmeline's history was settled, and that marriage to him would protect her from whatever had brought her to him. He couldn't bear to lose her now, when he'd discovered the strength to love again. Magnus vowed to fight him. No matter his legal claims, we'll challenge them. I'm protecting you, and the creed name matters here. Even as he spoke, Magnus worried if his power would be enough to preserve his beloved from a past that refused to die. Next morning, James Whitmore arrived at Stonewall Ranch with the assurance of a seasoned winner. Magnus found him younger than expected, possibly 35, with the soft look of a mathematician with a fortune. His costly outfit and shiny boots indicated wealth. His pale eyes were calculating, which made Magnus's teeth tense. I assume, Mr. Creed? Whitmore dismounted easily, but Magnus observed he favored his left leg. James Whitmore of Denver, I think you have mine. Mr. Whitmore, I have lots. Be more specific. Widow Emmeline Grace, my late partner's widow. Whitmore pulled a leather portfolio from his saddlebags like a weapon. I have paperwork that proves she must honor her husband's predeceased agreements. Magnus left the porch and positioned himself between Whitmore and Emmeline's residence. I guard Mrs. Grace. Your business with her spouse perished with him. Commercial law in civilized countries doesn't work that way. Whitmore's smile was cold. Thomas Grace pledged his wife's future to my firm. As his surviving partner, I acquired those rights when he defaulted. Show me these materials. Whitmore performed a dramatic portfolio opening, removing various formal papers and partnership articles. Page 3 of Thomas Grace and Whitmore Commercial Enterprises, dated 18 months ago, contains a personal guarantee agreement. Magnus grew uneasy as he read the papers. The legal language was complex and formal, with while clauses and conditional statements only lawyers could understand. One section was clear enough in exchange. Thomas Grace guaranteed all partnership assets, including family guarantees, for a large loan. Magnus said, "This is meaningless legal gibberish, raising uncertainty. A man can't pledge his wife like livestock, right?" When properly documented, territorial courts have upheld similar agreements. The partnership acquired Mrs. Grace. When Thomas signed this contract, his death doesn't nullify my claim. Activates it. I suspect this document is authentic because Emmeline was never notified of these agreements. No contract is binding without all parties' assent. It was terrible to hear Whitmore laugh. Sir Creed, women don't need approval for their husband's business decisions. Thomas Grace could legally pledge his wife's future to pay off his debts. The fact that he withheld information is irrelevant. Magnus tried to stay calm despite his growing rage. What are you claiming? Mrs. Grace travels to Denver to marry me and fulfill her late husband's commitments. In exchange, I'll forgive plenty. Debt Thomas accumulated via failed speculation. It's generous. She avoids poverty by marrying a wealthy man. This debt will be pursued through territorial courts if she refuses. Thomas Grace died, owing my firm over $8,000. I can legitimately claim his estate, including his widow's assets. Whitmore looked at the ranch house thoughtfully. My understanding is that she works here. Her wages, property, and arrangements could be seized. Clear and planned threat. Magnus understood Whitmore had properly examined their position, knowing Emmeline's pregnancy would leave her susceptible, and that Magnus could use his affections for her. You assume the documents are authentic, Magnus said thoughtfully. Before accepting claims, I'll have a lawyer review them. Naturally, I'll stay at the Cedar Falls Motel while you organize review. But Mr. Creed, Whitmore's voice hardened. I advise against delay. The longer Mrs. Grace stays, the more difficult her situation grows. Unmarried women living irregularly are frowned upon by territorial authorities. The threat to Emmeline's reputation was premeditated like Whitmore's other moves. Now Magnus recognized it wasn't only money or legal requirements. Control was about a man claiming a woman against her will. Magnus promised to review the documents in a week. I hope Generous and Mr. Creed will keep Mrs. Grace available for consultation. It would be awful if she disappeared again before these issues are settled. Magnus held Emmeline's marriage certificate, proof of her widowhood and his sole weapon against a man who looked eager to steal his future. As Whitmore galloped away, the Stonewall Ranch deed was scattered. Magnus's battle plan-like desk with hefty parchment and official seals represented 20 years of hard work and meticulous investment. He took it from the safe along with all his valuable documents to take a risk that could lose him everything he'd built. Holt responded from across the room, "You can't be serious." His worn face furrowed in amazement as he signed the ranch. Magnus, that's 20,000 acres and innumerable livestock. It's just livestock and land. Magnus spoke steadily despite feeling glass in his throat. Why have an empire without anybody to share it with? Martha entered with a tea service, moving sharply, disapproving. That Whitmore thing has been in town for 3 days, claiming Mrs. Emmeline as his property. All throughout town, talk is flying. Magnus knew the news. Whitmore was acting like a victor, buying drinks for everybody willing to listen to his story. He claimed that Emmeline was a deceptive widow trying to avoid her legal obligations, while he was a mistreated business partner seeking justice. Now where's Emmeline? She's been in the nursery since he came. Only speaks to check on the lawyer and won't eat. With parental worry, Martha softened her voice. Fearful and worried, she's terrifying. Magnus dispatched a rider to Denver with Whitmore's documents to consult the territory capital's top law firm. Even if the documents were fake, Emmeline's reputation may be irreparably damaged. She would find few places to hide as an unmarried, pregnant, scandalized woman. A lawyer's view won't matter. If Whitmore takes this to territorial court, Magnus decided, but if Emmeline becomes my wife before legal proceedings, her position changes altogether. The widow lacks protections, but Mrs. Magnus believed she would. In addition, Holt questioned if Whitmore has legal claims. Magnus touched the ranch deed with trembling fingertips. I'll give him what he wants, enough money to leave us alone. The ranch is worth far more than $8,000. Thomas Grace's estate claims may require me to hand it over. You'd sacrifice everything for her? The question hung in the air like dying fire smoke. Magnus thought about Sarah, their dreams, and death's snatched future. He remembered Emmeline's ability to bring life and optimism to his empty house and guarded heart. Love wasn't about defending what you had, he realized. That meant risking all for what mattered. Yes, he responded, I'd sacrifice everything. Their chat was interrupted by a faint knock. Emmeline entered the doorway, pale but composed, hand on her rounded belly. May I enter? Magnus quickly approached her in worry. You should rest. I should face this. He admired her steely voice from their first meeting. I've been hiding upstairs like a child while you address my problems. Not fair to you, and not who I desire. To be? She examined the ranch deed on the desk with increasing understanding. To protect me, you'll sacrifice the ranch. I will defend my future wife at any costs, even if you lose everything you've built. Magnus held her face, seeing his determination in her dark eyes. Before you came, Emmeline, this was property, valuable but empty. You made it homey. We're back to land and livestock without you. Though she cried, her voice stayed firm. What if I told you another way? What if I willingly joined Whitmore and eliminated this threat? Your life's labor lost. The idea hit Magnus hard. You can't truly consider that. Consider what's best for everyone. If I marry Whitmore, his legal claims disappear, your ranch is safe, and our child has a father. Who gives security? Our son has a loving father, Magnus yelled correction. Could I let you die for that man? Can I live with myself letting you go? So what do you suggest? The ranch deed was carefully folded by Magnus. I advise we win this fight instead of fleeing. Tomorrow we'll bike to town and face Whitmore's legal challenges. He must claim you in front of the entire territory to claim you. If he proves his legal rights, he'll find that certain things are more valuable than legal documents. Magnus's harsh voice made Holt look up. The Creed name has significance here. James Whitmore should learn what that implies. The Cedar Falls courthouse has never seen such a crowd. Ranchers, townspeople, and curious bystanders from throughout the territory packed the small structure to see Magnus Creed and the stranger who claimed legal rights fight. As territory magistrate, Judge Harrison presided over his prospective wife with dignity. With 20 years of frontier law expertise, he was fair and had heard every issue the rough region could create. But this case bothered him. Whitmore presented authentic, frightening legal documents. However, he raised unsettling questions. Mr. Whitmore, Judge Harrison remarked, adjusting his glasses, you argue Mrs. Grace must honor her late husband's promises. Make your argument. Whitmore stood out in the workaday crowd with his costly clothes and dramatic bravado. My firm and Your Honor, Thomas Grace formed a binding relationship 18 months ago. After losing big in wheat futures, he promised personal assets, including his wife's status. Mrs. Grace knew the contract was clear and binding. Arrangements. Your Honor, husband's legal obligations don't require awareness. Grace was entitled to pledge his wife's future for company debts. Whitmore spoke, and Magnus felt Emmeline's hand tighten. Even though she tried to hide her pregnancy, she sat alongside him with respect. Her vulnerability and Whitmore's premeditated malice made Magnus's blood boil with protective rage. The court said, Mr. Creed, you contest these assertions. Magnus slowly rose, filling the little courtroom. He talked with respectable authority. Your Honor, I contest all of this man's statements and character. But more importantly, his appearance timing is questionable. Explain. Over 6 months ago, Grace became a widow. Why wait to explore Mr. Whitmore's claims if they're true? Why let her go hundreds of miles before claiming his rights? Magnus focused on Whitmore. Predatory intensity. Whitmore's composure briefly wavered, unless those rights were invented. I heard about Thomas's death while in California for work. I resolved these issues shortly after finding Mrs. Grace. Magnus said convenient. What was your business partnership with Thomas Grace, Mr. Whitmore? I've mentioned wheat futures speculating. Have you recorded these transactions? Grain exchange, bank draft, warehouse receipt correspondence? First time. Whitmore hesitated. The fire that damaged my Denver offices last month erased the documents. A courtroom mumble. Magnus capitalized. Such a shame. Your word is all we have about these business dealings. Do the partnership terms speak for themselves? I had Denver lawyers review these records, Your Honor. From his vest pocket, Magnus took a telegram. Territory documents show Whitmore Commercial Ventures was incorporated 3 months after Thomas Grace's death. Pre-existing partnerships were impossible for the company. Whispers filled the courtroom. Whitmore remained calm despite flushing. Territory filings can have clerical errors. The deal stands. Magnus added, I've gotten Denver business community feedback on Mr. Whitmore's reputation. He unfolded another telegram. He may be under investigation for fraud involving widows and disputed estates. Judge Harrison leaned forward with focus. Does Mr. Whitmore want to respond? Allegations? Courthouse doors opened before Whitmore could respond. The telegraph operator raced in with a yellow message form. Emergency telegram from Denver Territorial Marshal's office to Judge Harrison. The judge read the statement swiftly, becoming stern. Denver has a warrant for Mr. Whitmore's arrest for fraud and embezzlement. The conspiracy? The Territorial Marshal wants you arrested immediately for extradition. Whitmore's meticulous facade collapsed. That's absurd. I pursue legal claims as a businessman, Magnus said, rising to his full height. You're a confidence guy who preys on defenseless ladies, and your scheme ends now. The deceitful merchant looked at Emmeline in despair as the territorial deputy arrested Whitmore. You believe you won? You carry a dead man's bastard without contracts. What decent man wants you damaged? Magnus's fist impacted Whitmore's after a heartbeat of insult, jaw sending the smaller man onto the defendant's table. As Magnus flexed his wounded knuckles, the court cheered. "Order! Order!" Judge Harrison slammed his gavel, but his expression seemed friendly. "Mr. Creed, I cannot condone violence in my courtroom, but some provocations are beyond any reasonable man's patience." Magnus watched Emmeline crying with relief when Whitmore was chained up. After the horror, their future was bright and clear. Martha brought her grandmother's ivory lace wedding veil to the hastily planned ceremony. She gave it to Emmeline that morning with tears in her eyes and a kiss on both cheeks, saying every bride deserves something old to bless her marriage with centuries of wisdom. Martha remarked, "You look beautiful," covering Emmeline's black hair with the veil like an angel sent to revive this dwelling. Emmeline watched her reflection in the bedroom mirror, barely recognizing the dazzling woman. Martha sewed a simple, elegant cream dress with flowing lines to accommodate her advanced pregnancy with dignity and grace. The afternoon light illuminated the grandmother's engagement ring, making her feel attractive again after Thomas's death. She said, one palm on her rounded belly, "I still can't believe it's true. This morning I feared losing everything." Martha concluded with satisfaction, "You're about to become Mrs. Magnus Creed. And not too soon, in my opinion. He's wandered this property for 3 years like a lost soul. You refocused him. Not every ranch hand was needed for the ceremony in the great room downstairs. 2 daily operations and neighbors from kilometers around showed up to see the union. Community relief at Whitmore's exposure had turned the wedding into a celebration of justice and love. When word of the morning's courtroom drama traveled quickly, men built a makeshift altar, and Magnus waited. Lumber and wildflowers, his usually austere visage melting with anticipation, he changed from his court clothes into his best suit, a dark blue wool that highlighted his strong shoulders and distinguished his silver-touched hair. Aged, Holt stood beside him as best man, beaming like a father. As Emmeline reached the top of the stairs, Cedar Falls preacher Reverend Porter smiled warmly. He began, dearly cherished, as she sank gently. "Today, we observe the union of 2 souls who found wholeness in one another." Magnus offered his arm tenderly at the foot of the steps, making her heart skip. "Ready?" he whispered. More. They gathered before the altar, hands together, eyes fixed on each other. Ceremony words fell on them like rain. Promises of love, honor, fidelity, and support through life's challenges. Magnus's voice filled the room during the vows. "I met Emmeline in my darkest season, and you brought light to shadowed places. I will love, defend, and cherish our family. I promise to repay your confidence and never take your heart for granted," Emmeline replied quickly, her voice strong despite her tears. "Magnus, you saved me when I was desperate. More importantly, you gave me hope for a lost future. I will help you construct something beautiful and lasting, be your partner in everything, and love you with all my strength." His grandmother's engagement ring and matching wedding band confirmed their vows. Before Reverend Porter could pronounce them husband and wife, Emmeline gasped and doubled over, touching her belly. "Oh," she gasped, staring at Magnus with awe and fear. "I think the baby's coming." Great room chaos ensued. Martha moved quickly while the men scattered like animals. Emmeline inhaled a contraction as Magnus carried her to the stairs. "Not now." She panted on his shoulder. "Not finished with the ceremony. The crucial pieces are done," Magnus assured her, tackling the stairs 2 at a time. "You're my wife, and this baby will have a respectable family." Martha was organizing the bedroom, ordering ranch hands for hot water and clean bedding, and shouting for the doctor from town. But Emmeline's labor moved too fast for outside help. Magnus delivered his son 2 hours after her first contraction with Martha's help and wife's determination. A raucous shout announced James Thomas Creed's birth throughout the house. Magnus cradled his son, who was his regardless of genetics, and felt his heart swell beyond what he believed imaginable. "Hello, little one," he muttered, handing the baby to Emmeline. "Welcome to Stonewall Ranch." Magnus saw his wife and son, healthy and perfect in the golden afternoon light, and realized that sometimes the best gifts come from desperate strangers on winter nights. He found love after he stopped looking, and family came from the most improbable places. In the frenzy, the veil was forgotten over a chair, but its blessing had taken hold. This new family is woven together by 3 generations of wisdom. 3 weeks after the baby's birth, a local delegation brought presents and apologies and gave the silver rattle. Mrs. Millicent Ashford led them. After disapproving, she lauded the new Mrs. Creed and her remarkable son. She oohed over James as he slept in his mother's arms, resembling his robust father. "Emmeline, you look gorgeous. Motherhood fits you." Emmeline patiently took the accolades, but Magnus saw her delighted grin. The same woman who wrote poison letters about an unmarried pregnant woman praised Mrs. Magnus Creed. Complete makeover. In one ceremony, Emmeline went from scandalous invader to revered village matriarch. "This modest expression of our appreciation is for you." Mrs. Ashford ceremonially produced the silver rattle. A true family treasure, it bears the Creed family crest and little James's birth date. Magnus accepted the gift with grace, but he quietly amazed at how rapidly public opinion might change. People muttered about Emmeline's virtue 3 weeks earlier. They competed to be tied to Ranch's latest success, Stonewall. After the guests left, Magnus found Emmeline nursing their son and humming a lullaby in the nursery. The image always moved him. This desperate, impoverished mom was beaming as she raised their child. The transition was total, sometimes like a dream. "Penny, for your thoughts," she murmured, smiling with his favorite sight. "I considered how much has changed. 6 months ago, I was an angry widower who thought I'd always grieve. You're a husband and father with a baby who keeps you up half the night," she finished with gentle teasing. Magnus said, "Now I'm the luckiest man in Dakota Territory," before rocking next her. "Ever regret it? Leaving your freedom for an obstinate rancher with a complicated past?" Emmeline laughed softly, musically. Magnus' belief. "I swapped despair for security, loneliness for love, and uncertainty for my strongest guy. I don't know what else a lady could have done better." James fell asleep on his mother's shoulder after nursing, his tiny fist holding her finger tightly. Magnus was amazed at how well the youngster fit into their lives, like he was supposed to complete them. He had no resemblance to his biological father. He looked to represent his parents' greatest qualities. "Territory Governor's Office sent word today," Magnus commented nonchalantly. "They suggest I join the Territorial Development Commission. Travel to Denver, discussions with railroad leaders, and influence over regional growth." "Oh, great." "You deserve the praise. I wanted to talk to you first. The job requires hosting formal parties for significant guests. You'd host political events." Emmeline thought about it. "Are you asking if I can or will take such responsibilities?" "Neither. Do you desire that life? You're sick of being told your role." Magnus's question showed his understanding. He saw through her kind facade to her steel core after 6 months of marriage. She overcame poverty, widowhood, and near destitution through willpower. She deserved to pick her own path. "I think," she continued slowly, "I'd love helping define this territory's future, especially if it means helping other desperate women find better possibilities." "You mean what?" "I mean using our power to build widow and orphan programs, schools, hospitals, and opportunities. As Queen Mother of Stonewall Ranch, I'll govern purposefully." Magnus was pumped with pride. Him and this woman were in love, determined to leave something important for future generations, not just security. Together, they might leave a legacy beyond cattle and land. He accepted the job, but only if James comes to Denver when he's old enough. "I want our son to realize that his heritage is duty to those who depend on us, not just wealth." Emily smiled brightly. Nana Rose probably approves. She was always of the opinion that the great people left the world better. As twilight fell over Stonewall Ranch, the silver rattle caught the lamplight from its place on the mantel, symbolizing acceptance, legitimacy, and a bright future for the family that had found each other against all odds. Years later, the family portrait remained above the great room fireplace, honoring the unlikely adventure that turned 3 strangers into an inseparable family. Magnus stood behind his seated wife, touching her shoulder and holding Rose. At 2 years old, she shows her mother's soft persistence. With his father's black hair and his mother's caring eyes, stood between his parents with the confidence of a boy who'd never been uncertain. In Emily's arms, baby Thomas, named for her first husband to heal, gurgled peacefully. "Please repeat the story, Mama," James asked from his sofa seat, his favorite nighttime ritual. "In winter, you found Papa." Emily smiled, relaxing in Sarah's rocking chair, now part of their growing family's bedtime routine. She started with the controlled pace of cherished repetition. A desperate woman walked across the snow on the coldest winter ever. Magnus listened while reviewing territorial capital letters at his desk. Schools, hospitals, and initiatives for poor families in the community are now his responsibility outside Stonewall Ranch. Emily was a true queen mother, using her power to protect the weak. Magnus thought on the wisdom of receiving unexpected presents. The woman who'd slumped at his gate seeking shelter had brought him everything he hadn't known he'd lost. Purpose, joy, a promising future. Also, snow fell again. Still, it appeared like blessing rather than judgment. After bitter experience, Magnus discovered a truth from the photo above the fireplace in the warm, loving house. Great treasures sometimes came as desperate winter strangers. Nights, and the boldest thing a man could do was admit possibility.